previously on In Transition.
Have to go to college. You have to do this. And I said, I just want to let you know right now, I'm not going to have that conversation. I'm going to ask them, do you want to go to college? How many of you want to go to college? It's totally okay if you don't. It's okay if you go when you're 26. If you don't want to do it right now, just if you want to do something, go figure out how to be the best at it. Go and make sure that you're doing something that feeds your soul. Forget whatever society told you or whatever. Do you know?
And also you don't have to do it forever.
Yeah.
Like the pressure that we put on ourselves to have the answer and the final answer at all of these different stages in our life. Wow. And especially with career stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That's a whole other tangent. But I mean, yes, I've made my way through the insurance industry for now 24 years, but I've tried to leave many, many times. I've daydreamt about doing a million other things. I mean, it's taken a lot of twists and turns and then finally doing my own thing to find my place in the industry. And that's just one example of that. And I'm not impractical, right? We need to be thoughtful about the future and our finances and all of that. But life shows us all the time how fleeting it is. Yes. And living a life for someone else or someone else's expectations is something that I have done. And since I have, again, trusted myself to start really making the decisions that are right for me and right for me in that moment, and that's really what my nomad lifestyle is a nod to, is not living 10 years in the future, but really living, I know where I'm going to be until September 1st. And I don't know yet beyond that where I'm going to be, but I trust myself that I'm going to figure it out. And that's been a very powerful learning for me along the way. And obviously some things you need to be thinking about proactively. But in general, I think a lot of these decisions come with so much pressure and so much weight unnecessarily.
Yeah.
We are so excited to be back for part 2 of this conversation. If you haven't listened to part 1, we encourage you to go back and take a listen. Now on to the show.
And it would be nice, just to your point, that more young women in particular started to grasp some of this stuff earlier. That's why I think Corey and I are so passionate about connecting with younger women as well, because there's so much they could glean and learn from our own experience. Because I always look at it like teenagers, you really don't think you know anything, and it's so confusing. You're like, how am I supposed to decide what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Mm-hmm. And then you hit your 20s and you're kind of like, I know everything. Right. Kind of that, like, I'm invincible, I've got all the answers kind of thing. And then you start to get into your 30s and you realize you don't actually know shit.
I was dumb as the day is long.
Yeah. You're like, I don't know shit and I don't know what I'm doing. And by the time you hit your 40s, you're kind of like seeking all the answers.
Yeah.
I want to know everything.
Yeah. Can I turn the table a little bit and ask you? So I'm not a big fan of like experts being experts coming on and giving you all the answers to life's questions. But I do love the framing of what is wisdom that you have now that you would share with your younger self. You know her, right? You know her really well. And I love this question because it's so personal, but yet so resonant with so many people. Can I ask you, like, do you have an opinion about that?
Something I would like tell my younger self almost.
Yeah. Like advice you might give her.
I think, to your point, the biggest thing that always stands out to me and that I tell women is start to trust yourself, or learn how to trust yourself. Because for me, that was something that got in my way perpetually over the course of my life, where I second guessed myself, where I didn't trust my gut. I was like, I felt it, but then I ignored it. Mm-hmm. And now finally in my 40s, I'm like, I pretty much rely on that instinct.
Yeah.
Telling me which direction to go. And I have so much trust in my decisions now, where when I was younger, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't trust it at all.
Yeah.
I think as women, we're so intuitive, and it's such a gift we don't tap into when we're younger. We just like to the point of checking all those boxes. That's the focus. I got to get through this list that I didn't even write.
But this is the list I'm supposed to be on. This is the list I'm supposed to tick all the boxes off of.
Secondarily, start writing your own list a hell of a lot sooner. What do you actually want?
Just live your life. Learn to love the absolute literal F out of yourself before you bring anybody else into the mix. You know? And it's hard, but to Lauren's point, you think if I knew all the stuff that I have accumulated in my 45 plus years of life and could go back and hit like age 28, it would be a completely different life, you know?
Yeah.
That's why I listen to I like mentoring fifth and sixth grade girls, because it kind of keeps stuff really real for me. And it also gives me a chance to be like, you don't have to do this. Who says you have to do this? No, this is your life. They've already lived their life. Go do what you want to do. Have enough love and self-esteem and self-respect and trust in yourself to go chase those dreams.
Whose boxes are you trying to check?
Yeah. It's like, did you write that list? Did somebody give you this list and say, this is what you have to do to have a great life? Because is their life great? Think about the person that handed you that list. How great is their life?
Yep. So Meg, how would you answer that question?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've just spent the last 45 minutes answering it in a roundabout way, but it would definitely be to the trust thing. The self-trust is huge. And also to give myself more grace.
Mm-hmm.
And the two, I think, kind of go hand in hand, because when you learn to trust yourself, you don't always get it right. And I think that the perfectionist in me kicks in, and it's like, well, I only want to do the things and I only want to take the chances that I think are going to give me the best outcome, and really being okay. My good friend Brene Brown talks about the messy middle, and like that there's beauty in the mess, and that even the messy bits still come with meaning and learning. And like, I was wired to, that perfection thing is deep, and it's still there. I still have to combat that on a regular basis. But, and that like, nobody's paying attention. Nobody's really paying attention at the end of the day. Like when you're a kid, if you grow up in what I would say a traditional, you've got parents looking over your shoulder, but there's sort of these entities that you're accountable to. And one of the wild things I think that happens as women, especially I'll speak for me personally, because I went from being a daughter to being a wife, and I didn't really have a chapter or a season where I was just me. Mm-hmm. I moved from sort of one system to another system. And it wasn't like my ex-husband was a controlling dictator type. He wasn't by any stretch. It's just, I never really explored, well, how do I feel about this? I was always in partnership with someone else in making these decisions. And I think one of the fascinating things as women is we don't recognize the moment when the shift back to us happens, when we finally get to say, I'm the captain of this ship. I'm driving this car, because we're kind of like tossed around between all of these different systems, if you will. And I don't think a lot of us really realize that we are in control, because we've conceded that control in so many different instances. And it took me until the end of my marriage and, really reestablishing myself as a one woman entity, that I really figured out how to make all of this work. And then again, to trust myself that I could. And I think that was and I don't know that you can rush that. I don't know that you can really change that, but, yeah, I don't know. There's so much here. I feel like we've just had a therapy session in addition to my usual therapy sessions.
No, I'm sitting here like everything that you're saying, that Lauren is just nodding her head, because like it's like, yeah, I understand. Mm-hmm. Yep.
We've all lived some version of it, I feel like, even though we're all unique and we've had different stories, different paths taken, there's like that through line. And that's what Corey and I are so passionate about, is that more women need to be in these conversations, having them so they can feel validated or acknowledged in this is life, and we're always in transition, and we've all gone through different things, but a lot of the same too, like the feelings underneath it all.
It may be presented differently, but it's the same fabric. It's the same experience. It's just presented, it's just gift wrapped differently, if you will. And when we're able as women to have experienced what we have experienced in our various life transitions, and have the privilege, because I honestly do feel on some levels it's a privilege and an honor to go in community with other women and say, hey, look, I've been there. I get it. And I'm not telling you that this is the roadmap, but I can definitely tell you what my experience has been working through that. And if you want to talk about it, if you want to talk about it, if you want me to walk side by side with you for a bit of it, I'm totally here for you. And I want you to take whatever lessons I've learned from it, if you can, and act on that and make it better. So then you can go to somebody and say, I've been there too. And it's okay. You're like, to Lauren's point, to make them, to validate them. And that this is not a freakish one-off thing. This happens. And we're here to help you. There's a lot of love, and there's a lot of power and unity in community.
Don't have to go it alone. And I'm like, I'd love to kind of dive deeper into this whole self-trust piece, because it seemed like a theme amongst the three of us. Like, you got to have self-trust. Mm-hmm. If you were talking to someone younger or someone even our age, because let's be honest, not everyone's at a different point. Like, it's not linear. What would you tell them about things maybe you've done or you would suggest doing to start working on your self-trust?
Yeah. So this is something that I have done in practice, but I do now for women out there in the world. And that is really, it's an exercise around cataloging the risks and the chances that you have already taken. Because when we talk about self-trust, we usually come from a place of deficit where we're like, I don't know. I'm waffling. I'm wavering. I always make bad choices. I always pick the wrong, whatever. That's where our natural sort of default thinking goes to, is a lack of self-trust. And when you want to build it back up, I think you have to rewind a little bit and look at all of the decisions that you have already made that have had, and I won't even say a positive outcome, because I would argue, is a marriage that doesn't last forever a failure? No. I would be wildly different today had I not had that experience. And so I choose very personal statement to not want to unravel that, because it would have changed who I am today. Could I have done without some of the hurt and the pain and yes, of course. But again, it has helped to shape the person that I am today. And so that's a very sort of practical, like, you can sit down with your pen and paper and you can look at from the earliest point, who did you decide to be friends with? Did you stand up for yourself when you were bullied in school? Or were you a bully? Where did you decide? How did you manage your education? Did you go to college? If you did you go away to school? Did you stay close to home? Did you know your roommate when you moved? Like, there are a million examples, and I've just given you like 10, that when we really start to think about, like, I have made some really, really, really good decisions in my life that have given me really, really good outcomes. And so whatever this thing is that I'm sitting on, because so many people that are listening to this are going to know, like, within an instant what the thing is that they're sitting on, whatever the leap is that they want to take, the transition that they want to enact. When you can look back, like, the confidence builds over time. And when you can look at that as a list and say, like, yep, done it. And instead of focusing on the default, which is the things that don't work out, but also, like, don't be stupid about it. Don't be reckless about it, right? Many of us have support networks. I'm a big fan of getting a second opinion, but I'm only a fan of getting a second opinion if you already know, when you go into that conversation, how you feel about it, because often that second opinion becomes our opinion. Yeah. And if you don't have a position to defend, then I would question, are you just asking for someone else to make the decision for you? Which I think is a powerful differentiator. And I have been very, very passive in this life. That's my default. Be the peacekeeper, be the diplomat, don't rock the boat, don't make waves. And what that means for me in practice is not asking for what I need, not asking for what I want, letting other people's needs and wants and desires become more important and more significant than my own, often to the detriment of my own. And, like, there are examples of times when that has happened. In the more recent past, there are examples of times when I've advocated for myself, and there have been, like, hearts and rainbows and unicorns and all sorts of good things that have come out of that. And so that's what I have to focus on in those moments of doubt.
Yeah. That's That's wild. I was like, are we the same person, Meg?
Honestly, I kind of feel like there's a little bit of Meg McKeen in
Yeah, in everyone. I'm like, oh my gosh, all
everybody.
the same things.
Yeah, there's a little bit, even to your, if I when I had to make the decision when college came into play, do I go away? Do I stay home? Looking back on it, I should have left, but I probably wouldn't be where I am now. And I also know that there's a reason I am where I am. So I respect that journey.
Are you ready for this? If I can interject specifically, and again, the discussion about higher ed, about college comes with a massive amount of privilege, which is also loaded in what I'm going to say to you now. But when I was making the decision about college, I had a couple options. I really wanted to go to the University of Montana. I'm from a suburb of Chicago. And it was highly suggested by those around me that I maybe go a little closer to home, because being in Montana, I wouldn't be able to come home for holidays and I would be very far away. And so I chose to stay. I went in Central Illinois, lovely school, had a great education, 25 years, almost 30, no, not 30, 25 years go by. And where am I going for the summer?
You'd be kicking it in Montana.
To the same place I wanted to go when I was 18 years old, making this decision. And so I would also offer that as no now doesn't mean no forever.
Yep.
And that for many women who are maybe like they're in motherhood, right? To bring this back around to the thing that we were talking about at the start, when the children turn 18 or 21 or 25, or whenever that very hands-on tactical part of motherhood shifts, then maybe it's time to invite some of those things back that maybe got set to the side or put on the back burner. And I see this now with my girlfriends who are sending kids off to college and are reacquainting themselves with themselves. And it's a beautiful discovery if you're open to it. It also can be very scary, and I respect that too. So you just never know. I think that's maybe the biggest, dumbest thing to say is like, you just don't know. So like one day at a time. And it just sounds so silly, but that really is true, Yeah.
Yeah. I listen to what you were saying about, when the kiddos start to leave the nest, I think about my brother and my sister-in-law, and maybe not so much my sister-in-law, but my brother. I mean, my nieces, their daughters are 28 and 25. I mean, they have a whole other life. And my brother is hanging out at motor speedways, driving exotic cars, going 100 plus miles per hour in a group text with one of our younger brothers. He's like, I'm going to go tornado chasing. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I've always wanted to do it. The girls are older. He goes, yes, my wife knows. So he's a whole different person now. He's done with dad, and my sister-in-law's done she's mom, but Maddie and Kayla, like I said, are 28 and 25. They have their whole thing. They have their whole lives. So they're actually living their lives, as empty nesters, but reintroducing themselves to each other and to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a transition, right? Like you need to have somebody to come on and talk about that, right? Talk about, if you haven't already, the transition from being a very present and hands-on parent to being, an empty nester. I think there's a whole, I've got, like I mentioned, a couple girlfriends. One of them just sent her youngest off to college, and she's going to start a flower farm. She lives on a beautiful piece of property. And so she's got her seeds germinating, percolating. I don't know what seeds do, but she's about ready to put them in the ground. And I'm like, I'm totally here for it. Like, go have a flower farm, like whatever that means to you and whatever significance, that is all for you. And if that's what you want life to, and my parents are healthy, knock on wood, and retired and live in Michigan. And they have really leaned into, my dad in particular, some passions and hobbies that I never saw coming, like just never predicted that he would have really glommed onto.